In the last video, we were fortunate to go fly in this 1957 T-28 Trojan. In this video, we're going to learn how Rodney Debuan became the only pilot with a heart transplant to get back his wings, the amazing circumstances behind that transplant, and how he decided to honor his donor with the David Niklas Foundation.
Well, I started flying, I guess about 1979, and flew some C-47s, DC-3 airplanes for a while. And just like most people in aviation who are not professional career pilots, I always wanted to fly something bigger and faster, and so I just kept moving up the chain, and currently have a little over 7,000 hours and have flown close to 30 different types of airplanes and own most of those. So basically, I just flew for personal and my business. And then at the age of 36 in 1993, I caught a virus and I was sick for a couple of days, and it went to my heart, which necessitated me needing a heart transplant. And I was given 6 months to live at the age of 36 years old. And so that put my flying on quietus for a little while, for a couple of years, and received my heart transplant. Then it was a struggle going back to the FAA trying to get my medical back, because the FAA had never recertified anybody with a heart transplant. And now I have my medical back, and right now I'm the only heart transplant pilot has a valid medical. Well, it took me a long time. It took years, and because I was very healthy, playing 3 basketball leagues a week, lifting weights 4 or 5 times a week, and I needed a heart transplant because I caught a virus, not because I had heart disease for years. I was very, very good condition, and that's one of the things that allowed me to live long enough to get a heart transplant. So after my transplant, I did all the medical tests and everything that they asked, and all my doctors, said there's no reason why this guy can't be flying, but the FAA had never certified anybody. And so I actually made, back then, 2 trips up to DC to visit with John Jordan, the federal air surgeon at the time. And, he just was very blunt. He said, obviously there's no reason why you shouldn't be flying, but to get the FAA to do something for the first time is just damn near impossible. So let it sit for a while, and then kind of funny, about 7 or 8 years later, I got 7 or 8 years ago, I got a letter from the FAA. Almost the gist of it was, "Oh, we see you're still alive, so maybe you might want to come back and talk to us." So I had to go through all that crap again, and I got my medical. It's a special issuance. I have to do all the tests once a year and recertify every single year. But now I've been doing it now, and so as long as things stay status quo, it shouldn't be a problem.
Hi, I'm Becky Niklas Kelly. I am the Director of Operations for the Niklas Foundation. Niklas Foundation was founded in 1995 by Rodney and Isabel Debuan after Rodney received a heart transplant in 1993, in which my family donated my brother David's heart to Rodney.
Going through the process of getting enlisted for a heart transplant, and then becoming sicker and sicker every day, because if you doctors give you 6 months to live, I looked at it like from a pilot standpoint. I'm flying along and I got 4 hours fuel on board. Well, 30 minutes later I got 3.5 hours. 30 minutes later I got 3 hours. And so instead of every day waking up, the first thought of my brain was, I'm alive today. It was, well, there's one more day checked off the calendar. And so about halfway through this process, about 3 months into it, a friend of mine named Ken Johnson, who was a Marine and was in Vietnam. And one morning he called me and said, I heard you were sick. And I said, yeah, Ken. And he said, well, I woke up this morning and I was told I was going to find you a heart. And of course, my first thought was, well, that's impossible. How can you do that? And I thought, Ken was always a little bit odd. And so I thought, well, he just went off the edge, I actually had a picture in my mind of something different, but well, the night before that, I had come to the situation to where I realized that life was slipping away from me, and I finally realized that this was something that I personally could not control. I just couldn't will it or make it not happen. And I had two sons, an 11-year-old and an 8-year-old at the time. And, you know, I just finally made the decision that I wasn't going to leave my boys and that I needed some help. So I opened the Bible and started reading in it and made the deal, you know, if God would lead me here, then I would spend my time where he needed me. I read an area in Psalms that said, my heart fails within me, and show me the number of my days, and man at his best just to whisper. So naturally I closed the book up thinking I'm in the twilight zone, thinking, well, that's what I'm experiencing and this is kind of weird. So the next morning Ken calls me and says he woke up and he was told he was going to find me a heart. Well, Ken's not overly religious, and I thought that was pretty much impossible, so I thanked him and went on my way. Well, a few weeks later, Ken brought a friend of his by to visit with me. This man's name was Mr. Bramlett, and his nickname was Lucky. And Ken and Lucky were best buddies, and Lucky was about 10 years older than Ken. And we visited for a couple hours, and they left. And then Ken would come by once a week and see me, but I never saw Lucky, Mr. Bramlett, again. About 6 weeks after that initial meeting, Ken called me and said, do you remember Lucky Bramlett? And I said, yeah. And he said, well, he has a grandson named David Niklas who just got out of the Air Force Academy. And he's down at Randolph Air Force Base, and David was in a motorcycle accident and he's on life support. And I said, well, you know, Ken, this is horrible. Why are you telling me all this? And he said, the Niklas family wants to give David's heart to me. So that's a strange conversation to have, and somebody offering you life, but you've just been heard of somebody else who's experienced the loss. So I called my doctor, and he said, well, Rodney, you guys are not going to match. And I said, you know, it's never been done before, a directed heart donation. And he said, it's just not going to work, but I'll check into it. And all this time, you know, Becky and her family, you know, I didn't know them at that time, you know, they're going through the horrible process of losing their brother, their son, and making that decision. So my heart surgeon called back about 8 hours later, and he said, you guys matched perfect. I have no way to explain it. And here I am today. I received David's gift. So two things that happened. One is that Ken did what he said he was going to do. I mean, Ken did find me a heart through the introduction of Lucky Bramlett. And the other thing is that my family gained another family, the Niklas family. This is, you know, Becky, David's sister. And so she's lost her brother, but for the last 25 years, her and her family have adopted me and my family. And in 2 years after the transplant, 1995, I wanted to give back for the gift that I've been given. Plus, the first thing that Becky's mom said to me when I did finally get to meet her, about a year after my transplant, the first thing Dink, Becky's mom, said was that she was afraid people would forget who David was. And so I thought, well, at least I can make sure that doesn't happen. And Becky's been, you know, right there with me all along the way since. And so we formed the David Niklas Organ Donor Awareness Foundation. And we provide transplant, we provide flights for families who need to travel to get medical help for transplants. We provide housing for families that need to come to the Dallas-Fort Worth area to get a transplant. We give them a free place to live for as long as it takes, sometimes 2-3 years. And we do high school scholarships to promote awareness and quite a few other things. But the main thing is it totally redirected my life. And so after my transplant for the first 12 years, I didn't go back to working. Worked with the foundation to create the foundation, but I spent every day those first 12 years watching my 8-year-old and 11-year-old son grow up. And you know, life is very short and life is very precious, and we don't think bad things will happen to us. And we all know that it does. And sometimes when that bad thing happens, it it sends you on another direction that makes your life better, and what time you have left. So, you know, every time, and from my point of view, every time Becky or her family sees me, I'm thinking that they're reminded that they lost David. They don't look at it that way. They look at it that, you know, we're pursuing and furthering David's legacy, and so many more people today know who David is and know what his story was.
David was a very boisterous person. He never met a stranger. Was a lot like Rodney. How Rodney's the same way. You know, he'll introduce himself to anybody and tell people how it is. Being able to work every day with Rodney and knowing that part of David's there, you know, we still feel him. You know, every interview we give, every event we have, David's present, and Rodney's made that possible for not only my family, but just hundreds of other people who have benefited from our story. Just the people you meet, they're so thankful. And, you know, I know David's smiling down upon us, and he's proud of what we've done. When you have to have a transplant, there is a window when the organ's available that you have to be to the transplant hospital. And there aren't many transplant hospitals other than in a metroplex type area. So we have people from Kansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana who don't live within that time frame. And what we do is we offer some relief. We offer them an apartment that's fully furnished at no charge to them. Therefore, they're not having to pay a mortgage back home as well as rent somewhere just to be able to get listed to, you know, to possibly save their life. So we're relieving that financial burden of these people by providing these apartments and just giving them a sense of home, you know, not living out of a hotel, you know, being able to cook a meal and sleep in a, you know, real bed and have a living room and a living space that they can make their own while they're here. Right now we have 10 units, and we're in the process of building more apartments in the area, and we hope to just expand and, you know, do 10 more at this apartment complex, 10 more at the next. So, you know, the sky's the limit to the amount of people that we can help.
I mean, usually we don't turn anybody away. So even though we have an average of around 10 families at one time, if another family comes up and there's a need, then we find a way to provide it. You know, what you got, one thing that people need to realize is if somebody's diagnosed with a terminal illness, well, if they're the breadwinner of the family, they're not working anymore. Mm-hmm. And you live up in Nebraska or Kansas or anywhere, and so you're not working, but the only hospital that will give you a chance at life is down here in Dallas-Fort Worth. Well, how are you going to get down here, and how are you going to pay to live while you're waiting? And so we just try to eliminate that issue. And, you know, because an organ transplant it's not like trying to cure cancer. We're not out there trying to create awareness for a new cure or a new drug or new procedures. It's just a waiting game. It's just if you're fortunate enough to get on a transplant list, and if you're alive the day an organ and a transplant is available to you, then you have a chance. And still today, about 50% of everyone who actually gets on a transplant list does not live long enough to survive a transplant. And the last statistic that we were made aware of is that if 5% of the population became donors at the time of their passing, we'd have a surplus. So it really is just an educational awareness issue. And, you know, what else can you do in life that you could save the lives of 5, 6, 7, 8 people, and it doesn't cost you anything? Doesn't even cost you any effort. So it really is, you know, we talk to people all the time, and but I like to tell people that don't be thinking of, you know, being a donor yourself. That is important, but be thinking if somebody that you love needs an organ transplant. Well, how are they going to get it? And unless there are donors, they're not going to get it. So And you know, there's the thing that Becky and her family can attest to is out of the immense tragedy of losing David, at least something good came out of it. It's not just one big giant black hole loss. But our relationship has been tremendous because we became family by choice, not family because we were just blood related.
You know, the main thing that we like to tell people is to become an organ donor. When you go renew your driver's license, they ask, you want to be an organ donor? That's the first step. And the most important thing is talk to your family. Let your family know your wishes. Because when family's stuck with a tragedy that they've lost a loved one, the last thing they want to hear is a doctor coming saying, hey, let me take more from your son or your daughter. And when the family knows that these are your wishes, it takes that burden away. You're able to say, yes, this is what he would want to do. This is what she would want to do. She wants to go out in life, giving life to others.
You know, David, when he was at the Air Force Academy, he made it aware to a friend of his, as well as his older brother, Rowdy. Rowdy was in the Marines, and he made it aware to them that being an organ donor was important to him. Now, this is a 20-year-old man 2 years before he lost his life. And so when David passed away and the family made the decision to take him off life support, and the doctors had asked about this, Becky's brother Rowdy spoke up and said, you know, David, talk to me about this. This is what David wanted. And so it is important, not only what you sign at the driver's license, but it's important to tell your family, because at the time of your passing, you can't speak for yourself. And it's the family that the doctors are talking to. And so they're the ones that need to know, yes, this is what my loved one wanted. And, you know, it is the last unselfish act you'll ever get to do on this earth. If we're put on this earth to help our fellow man, this is the Super Bowl of that effort. And it's the last time you get a chance to do it.
And to quote scripture again, John 15:13, greater love has no one than this, that he laid down his life for a friend. So it strikes your heart.
But I still feel today that, and which is true, every time, you know, we as pilots, we all know how much joy flying brings us, how much meaning that means to us in our life. And, you know, David Niklas went to the Air Force Academy, and it was his dream to be a pilot. So he still gets to fly, because every time I'm flying, he's with me. And not only in spirit, he's physically with me. You know, if I just gave up flying many years ago, that'd be giving up on David's dream too. So that's part of why we do it.
We always love volunteers. We have an annual golf tournament that we do every year to raise money to help fund some of the apartments. Come in and help send out flyers. You can contact us at www.niklasfoundation.org, and that's the David Niklas Organ Donor Awareness Foundation.